Buddhist sermon is delivered by Venerable Maharagama Ananda Thera, Sandavimala Sanasuna, Valigampitiya, Pokunuvita.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I pay homage to the Blessed One, the Exalted One, the Fully Enlightened One. Dhamma friends, for today's Dhamma sermon, I have selected a particular Dhamma discourse from Samyukta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha. The title of the discourse is Sankha Dhamma Sutta, which stands for the conch blower. You know what is the meaning of the conch blower? We have heard about the conch shells and all. And the person who blows this conch shell is called the conch blower. But this discourse is not on a conch blower, but it is basically on the Maitri Cheto Vimukti, the liberation of mind based on mindfulness. Dhamma friends, when the Buddha was living in Pavarika's mango grove in Nalanda, there came a person called Asibandaka Putta Gahamani, who was a disciple, a lay disciple of Nigantanatha Putta, the founder of Jainism. He came to the Buddha and paid homage and seated aside. Then, as a practice, the Buddha started the conversation. The Buddha basically asked from this disciple, Gahamani, what does your teacher teach us to his disciples? That was a very simple question. Then the Gahamani replied, Venerable Master, my teacher says, anyone at all who destroys life is bound for a state of misery, is bound for hell. The Pali word was Yokochi Pana Matipateti Sabboso Apaiko Nereiko. This was a particular interpretation of a person who is destined to hell or destined to apaya in Pali. Basically what it means is anybody who violates the first precept, the Panatipata Veramani Sikha Padang Samadhyami, he is bound for a state of misery. Definitely he will go to the hell. And in the same way, the person who steals, the person who engages in sexual misconduct, and the person who engages in false speech are also bound to this destiny. And he added that one is led on to rebirth by a manner in which one usually dwells. In Pali, we call yam bahulang viharati tena niyati. In other words, what you frequent in your day-to-day life is a particular decisive factor which takes you either to hell or heaven. So here, the Gahamani said, one is led on to rebirth by a manner in which one usually dwells. Having heard this, the Buddha here makes a subtle logical question from Gahamani. Then the Buddha says, if Gahamani, it were the case that one is led on to rebirth by the manner in which one usually dwells, then according to your teacher's teaching, Gahamani, no one at all would be bound for a state of misery, bound for hell. Then, having heard this Gahamani, the Asibandaka Putta Gahamani, was puzzled. He couldn't think anything else. He was puzzled after hearing this. Having understood that, what Buddha said was, the Buddha continued the sermon, explaining the basic details of this discourse. Then the Buddha preached this to this Nigantanatha Putta's disciple. Here Buddha says, in the case of a person who destroys life, the Buddha asked this question again from Gahamani. Gahamani, what do you think? In the case of a person who destroys life, if one compares one occasion with another, whether by day or by night, which is more frequent? He's asking the occasion when he is destroying life or those when he is not doing so. In simple terms, a person who destroys life a majority of the time of a day, he doing what? He spends the day killing animals or not killing animals. Then the Gamini replied, Venerable Master, the occasion when he is destroying life are infrequent, while those when he is not doing so are frequent. Then the Buddha again said, that is why I told you. Then, according to your reply, the person who kills animals is frequenting a lot of time in a day, majority of time, by not killing animals. Therefore, if your teacher's statement is true, then nobody goes to hell. Then, having understood, having preached that, the Buddha adds, then comes the most important part of this discourse, Dhamma friends. In here, I would like to remind to all the listeners of this Dhamma sermon, there could be people in this society who have already committed some misdeeds like killing animals, stealing, sexual misconduct, and telling false speech. So there could be people like that. But as Buddhists or non-Buddhists, there should be a way out of this problem. We know that there is a repercussion for all the bad things that you have committed. But as layman, you should have a way out of this. So here, what Buddha teaches is, the Buddha gives a solution. Here he starts preaching the solution. He again calls Gamini and preaches this. Here Gamini, there's some other teacher holds such a doctrine and view as this. He refers to himself and says, there emerges a Buddha, a Samma Sambuddha in this world. And then again, before that, the Buddha refers to the Nigantanatha Putta again. Then he says, Gamini, just imagine, there's a teacher just like your teacher who teaches that anyone who takes life are bound to hell. And there's a disciple who is very interested on this teacher and who is a very interested disciple of this teacher who listened to his master very well. Then he says, he believes like this. He thinks, my teacher says that anyone who destroys life is bound for a state of misery, is bound for hell. Then I have also done some misdeeds like this. Then now I have destroyed life in my life at some time. So I too am bound to the state of misery, bound for hell if my master is correct. Then this disciple of that teacher thinks, Dhamma friends, here the Buddha says, if such a disciple is to keep thinking like this, is repenting over what he has done before, throughout his life, thinking that I am such and such person who have destroyed life. My teacher says that I am bound to hell and I will be surely go to the hell. Then if he do not abandon that thought, if he do not relinquish that view, Dhamma friends, the Buddha says, he, according to his deserts, he will be, as it were, dropped off in hell. Just like someone takes him from one place and drops to the hell, he will be reborn in hell. Then, Dhamma friends, the Buddha refers to the solution. Now comes the solution. Then again the Buddha says, but Gamini, there arises a Tathagata, a Buddha in this world, an Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, accomplished in true knowledge and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed. We call teacher of devas and humans, the enlightened one, the blessed one. Then he preaches to the world, don't kill animals, don't steal, you should not engage in sexual misconduct, you should not tell lies. He preaches like that to the world. And he stops people doing so. He warns people. He preaches not to violate these precepts. Then there's a disciple who is devoted to the Buddha. He thinks like this, Dhamma friends. Buddha says, in many ways, my teacher, the Blessed One, criticizes and censures the destruction of life and all the other bad things. Now, in my case, now I have also destroyed life in such and such extent in my life. I know that it wasn't proper. I know that it wasn't good. But though I feel regret over this, although I keep repenting over this, without abandoning that thought, that evil deed of mine cannot be undone. Thinking like that, having reflected thus, Dhamma friends, that disciple he abandons the destruction of life and he abstains from the destruction of life in the future also. Thus, here comes the abandoning of the evil deed, the killing. Thus, there comes about the transcending of that evil deed also. In the same way, Dhamma friends, the Buddha says, such a disciple will avoid, abstain from all the dasa akusala, we call tenfold unwholesome deeds. What are they? Destruction of life, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, and divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, covetousness, ill will and hatred, and lastly, wrong view. So, having abandoned all these tenfold unwholesome deeds, we call dasa akusal in Pali. Here, Dhamma friends, the Buddha says, the Buddha adds that especially putting much weight on the last 3 points, last 3 unwholesome deeds, then he become devoid from wrong view, abandoning the ill will and hatred and being avoid of the covetousness. What does he do? He dwells pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with loving kindness. This is the solution, Dhamma friends, the Buddha suggests. If you really want to alleviate all the repercussions that are bound to face, that are bound to confront with for all the bad deeds that you have done, here the Buddha suggests such a person should dwell pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the 2nd quarter, and also the 3rd quarter, and also the 4th quarter, and also the above, zenith and nadir, zenith and nadir, and above and below, across and everywhere. In simple terms, Dhamma friends, he should spread loving kindness to almost all the directions without a single distinction, keeping all the beings in an equal position, and to all as to himself, and dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with loving kindness. That particular thought is vast, Dhamma friends. It is exalted. It is measureless. That is why we call appamana in Pali. It is without hostility and without ill will. Can you imagine the power of such a thought? Without a single distinction for any animal or living being. Then, Dhamma friends, as I told you in the very inception of this sermon, the Buddha draws an example, taking a conch blower. We know who is a conch blower. In the past, in the king's army, there was a person whose duty was to blow a conch shell going to a top of a mountain in order to give a message to his companions in the army. What does he do? He does blow the conch shell, and the sound itself gives the message. Likewise, the Buddha says, just as a strong conch blower can easily send his signal to the 4 quarters, so too, Dhamma friends, when the liberation of mind we call Cheto Vimukti by loving kindness, Metta Cheto Vimukti, is developed and cultivated in this way, as we mentioned before, any limited karma that was done does not remain there, does not persist there. That are the very words. That means, Dhamma friends, if you have done something in the karma avachara world, sensuous plane, any repercussion which is abound with that negative karma will not take place, will not remain. When you have developed your mind in the arupa loka, a particular trance which you develop in the formless world, we call arupa dhyana. The metta cheto vimukti is a arupa dhyana. Very simply, what you have done in the sensuous world, if it is taken to the formless world, it would not survive. It will not persist. It would not remain there. Therefore, Dhamma friends, in the Pali, the Buddha says, Sayathapi Gamani Balava Sankadhamo. Just imagine Gamani, there was a conch blower, Appa Kasireneva Chatuddisa Vinyapeya, without the least effort. He sends a signal to all four quarters using his conch shell, just like Evang Bhavitaya Mitta Cheto Vimuktya. This liberation of mind based on loving kindness, when you have practiced again and again very frequently, Evang Bahuli Kathaya Yam Pamana Katang Kammang. If there's a limited kamma that you have done in the sensuous world, Natang Tatravasisati will not remain in that formless mind. Natang Tatravatittati will not persist, will not survive in that formless world. In this way, Dhamma friends, what Buddha suggests is all the people, irrespective of their age, should cultivate, should practice this liberation of mind based on loving kindness. How should we do that? We have already practiced the meditation on loving kindness we call Maitri Bhavana. So, taking that Maitri Bhavana to the height of Maitri Cheto Vimukti, Dhamma friends, the liberation of mind based on mindfulness, the Buddha suggests that one can alleviate majority, most part of the repercussions that he is bound to face unless he practice this liberation of mind based on mindfulness. Therefore, Dhamma friends, being Buddhist, be you Sinhala or Hindu or English, if you can place your faith in the Buddha, if you can place your faith in the Dhamma, if you can rely on the Sangha, if you believe that what Buddha says is correct, then you can practice this irrespective of your religion. If you practice this Dhamma, friends, the Buddha assuredly says you can alleviate, you can minimize the repercussions that you have to face in this world. Very simple terms, simply put, if you practice this again and again, what happens is all the misdeeds that you have done in this world, knowingly or unknowingly, will not remain in your repository of karma. You don't have to take them to the next world because you are destroying all the negative repercussions of your negative actions. Therefore, it would be a big relief, Dhamma friends, because we know in our society, there are people who have knowingly or unknowingly committed some bad deeds, negative deeds, especially in prisons and also out of the prisons, who are repenting over again and again, giving much pain to their minds throughout their life. Dhamma friends, if you keep repenting that way, what happens is that particular thought that you have frequented will take you to the hell very easily. Therefore, what Buddha suggests is, you should not repent over what you have already done, because no use. You cannot undo, you can't reverse the action because it is already done. So what you have to do is, you can correct yourself from one particular point in your life, thinking, okay, from this point, I will not do that negative deed again. I will refrain from doing that negative, the unwholesome deed in the future as well. In that way, you abandon that wrong livelihood, wrong deed, Dhamma friends. And also, that is not enough. You have to give a solution for what have you already done in the past, the bad deeds. So the solution comes here, Dhamma friends. If you can develop this Maitri Cheto Vimukti, or this liberation of mind based on mindfulness, Dhamma friends, the Buddha says you will be able to alleviate, you will be to minimize, you will be able to cut off the majority of the part of the negative actions which you are bound to face in the future merely by practicing this liberation of mind based on mindfulness as depicted in this Sankadhamma Sutta. Therefore, Dhamma friends, just to summarize what we have discussed so far, we have selected a sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya, which is from the connected discourses of the Buddha called the Sankadhamma Sutta. Basically, in this sutta, what Buddha wanted to tell this Asibandhaka Putta Gahamini was that his view was wrong, to correct him. Then, having heard this Dhamma sermon, Dhamma friends, what this Asibandhaka Putta Gahamini thought was, he was very pleased after hearing the Buddha's word. Then he told the Buddha, from today onwards, Venerable Master, let the Blessed One, let the Buddha remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. Likewise, this is a very important sutta which you won't hear so often in the electronic media or in written literature, Dhamma friends. Therefore, I suggest you don't just limit this Dhamma discourse just for your listening. You have to teach this to one of your friends, and you have to teach this to your children if you are a parent, and you have to teach this for your friends if you are a good friend, and you have to teach this to your subordinates if you are a good boss, and you have to teach this to your students if you are a good teacher. And above all, you have to teach this to all the people if you are a good human being. And you have to teach this all your non-Buddhist friends also if you are a good Buddhist. Because, Dhamma friends, this particular subject is not confined to Buddhist. Because we know there are people who belongs to other religions also who have done unwholesome deeds. There should be a solution, there should be a relief, there should be a remedy for all the people, not only for Buddhists. Therefore, that is why, Dhamma friends, the Buddha did not preach Dhamma only for Buddhists. He preached Dhamma to all the humankind of the world out of compassion we call Mahakaruna. The compassion is repenting over others' misery. When you see somebody is in a very unpleasant or a very dangerous situation, if your heart trembles for them, then you have karuna. What Buddha had was the Mahakaruna, a karuna which has developed to the highest heights, Dhamma friends. Therefore, out of this Mahakaruna, the great compassion, the Buddha preached this Dhamma discourse, the Sankadhamma Sutta, which teaches us how to refrain from wrong deeds, especially the Dasa Akusala, and how to give a solution for what you have already done, the negative karma, the bad repercussions that you have to face. Then, Dhamma friends, basically this sutta teaches how to avoid the 10 unwholesome deeds, and how to give a solution, how to give a remedy to all the negative repercussions that you are bound to face. Then, having mentioned that, Dhamma friends, I would like to end this Dhamma discussion just giving this message to the entire world. So, let us recall all the good karma, all the wholesome deeds, all the merits that we have accrued by listening to this Dhamma sermon, and all the wholesome deeds, all the karma, good karma that we have accrued, that I have accrued by preaching this Dhamma sermon, let us transfer all this merit to all, first of all, to all the deities who protect this country, the Buddha Sasana, and all the humankind of the world. Let them rejoice in this merit and let them attain Nibbana at their leisurely pace. And also, Dhamma friends, all the merits that we have accrued by preaching and listening to this Dhamma sermon, let us transfer all these merits to all the departed relatives of us, and let them rejoice in this merit. If they are in a bad, if they are in unpleasant status, let them go back to pleasant states, and finally let them attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. And also let us transfer all the merits that we have accrued by listening to this Dhamma sermon and myself preaching all this Dhamma. Let us transfer all these merits for all the fallen war heroes of this country who have sacrificed their life, limb, and liberty to the sovereignty and integrity of this country. And lastly, let us transfer all these merits to all the living beings of this universe, irrespective of the plane that they are living, and let them rejoice in this merit and let them attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the noble triple gem bless you. Theruvan Saranai.
The Buddhist sermon was delivered by Venerable Maharagama Ananda Thera, Sandavimala Sanasuna, Valigampitiya, Pokunu Vita.